As a survivor of psychological or spiritual abuse, do you ever get frustrated because it seems like guilt, shame, and obligation are constant companions on your road to recovery? My name is Dr. Felucia, and I'm a licensed psychologist. And in this video, I'm going to explain a little bit more about why that can happen and some ways, some psychological techniques that you can use to help you through that. So again, back to my question, guilt, shame, obligation. I'm sure are well versed in these emotions and experiences, being a survivor rather of psychological and or spiritual abuse. And when people are going through these types of experiences, they often say that they have a really difficult time just making a decision, right? A decision that should be so simple seems to take a really long time or just use up a lot of emotional energy because of the constant cloud of guilt, shame, or obligation. Well, one reason why this can happen is because as a survivor of these types of psychologically manipulative behaviors, specifically, I'll talk about them. I've talked about them in my other videos, but things like gaslighting and coercion, all those other sorts of techniques that manipulative and abusive people use. After you've been a recipient of that for a while, it really takes a toll on your emotional energy, and you tend to operate out of doing things to avoid feeling guilty, avoid feeling shame, or feeling like you are beholden to somebody and you're doing what you're doing out of obligation. One reason why this can occur is that people who are psychologically manipulative tend to use shame as one of their weapons of choice to get people to do what they want. If you think about people who engage in these types of behaviors, they don't believe that the person that they're interacting with should have a choice in their own life. And so they can try to control them, but the way in which they do so is subversive. They're not going to come out and say, you better do what I want. Some people do, but a lot of times, especially in spiritual environments, a lot of manipulation is used. And so when people manipulate others, they can do so in a lot of ways. But one way they do that is by weaponizing feelings of shame, guilt, and obligation. And so instead of saying, hey, this is what I would like for you to do, I prefer for you to do things this way, they will try to shame you or even capitalize on feelings of existing shame that they pick up on that you might have in order to get you to do what they want. And so their mentality is sort of like this opt-out mentality. Now, what do I mean by opt-out? Like if you've ever signed up for a newsletter or purchased something, you might wonder why you're getting all these emails, all these phone calls, just all this extra communication that you didn't sign up for. And if you go back on the form, there may be a little box that says, opt out, meaning that once you sign this form, you have all this other stuff that is going to be coming your way in terms of communication. And so just like you sign up for something that you didn't really intend to or realize, that same sort of mentality or that same sort of mechanism can also happen in interactions with abusive people, especially people who are psychologically or spiritually abusive. And so their opt-out mentality is kind of expecting you to do a bunch of things or behave in certain ways without explicitly communicating their desires. And so, if you ever have dealt with a friendship or a relationship with somebody like this, they may have a lot of unsaid expectations that they communicate to you through shame, guilt, and obligation. So maybe you never agreed to do something, but then they said, well, I can't believe you didn't do X, what's wrong with you? Or you're so selfish, you're unkind, just making these character assassinations or very negative and deep judgments about your character because you did or didn't do something that they never explicitly communicated to you about, right? And so, and it can take a lot of forms, but the way I want you to think about this is that you have, by entering a relationship with them, you kind of have taken on a set of expectations that not only were you not aware of, but you kind of have to go back in time and opt out. And the only way you can opt out is by opting out of a relationship with them. And I know it might sound a little bit confusing the way I'm describing it, but just bear with me as I try to explain this. And so basically, when you are in a relationship with somebody like this, there's a lot that you signed up for that you were not aware of. Lots of expectations, lots of things that you are expected to do, or ways that you're expected to act that maybe don't fit with your values, or things that you just didn't even sign up for, right? And so for some people, it could be marrying into a particular family, and that family expects you to be at every single thing they're doing, stay hours before and stay hours after, and they never asked you for help. But let's say you just didn't, you just showed up at the time of the party, you left, you get an angry phone call, and people are telling you how selfish you are because you didn't get there hours before and stay hours after. And so this is kind of how that works. If you don't want to do that, by opting, you really can't opt out unless you kind of go back in time or stand up for yourself in that moment. And even though I encourage and advocate for people to set boundaries, we also have to be realistic about how that can look. And so I say all of that to say that think about that. Take a minute, grab a journal, pen, paper, and list all the things that you feel you did not have a say in opting out of. Basically, you were kind of like opted into this stuff without agreeing to it, right? And this takes the form of like uncommunicated expectations, unrealistic expectations, things like that. Whatever you feel abusive people have weaponized weaponized shame and guilt against you to get you to do. So take a moment and write all those things down. And while you're writing it down, I just want to ask you, if you haven't already, please take a moment to like the video, share the video, and also subscribe if you haven't done so, and also comment. And what this does is it shows this video to other people that could benefit from it. So if you haven't done so, please take a minute to do so. I'd really appreciate that. So you can pause the video too if you need to just make that list of things that you didn't really sign up for. And then the second thing I would like for you to do is to make a list of things that you want to do. So maybe you can take a piece of paper and fold it. On the right side, you're going to have the opt-out list, right? And things that you just didn't really sign up for, that you don't want to do, that you're doing out of shame, out of avoiding feelings of guilt, or out of obligation. And these don't necessarily have to be in that relationship with that person or as part of that spiritually abusive institution. As part of our recovery, sometimes we can take those mindsets and put expectations on ourselves that maybe no one else has even asked us to do, right? So think about that. And then on the left column, I want you to have something called an opt-in column. And in that column, I would like for you to think only about what you want to do. What is your choice here? What are your choices, things that you are saying, look, this is what I want to do. This is what I'm going to actively put my energy into. And I'm doing this because I want to, or I choose to, not because someone is expecting me to, or someone is trying to suggest I do this through weaponizing guilt and shame. Okay, so take a minute, pause the video if you need to, and make a list of things that you are choosing to do. These are things I want to do, your opt-in list, okay? And when you're done, look at the difference between the opt-in column on the left and then the opt-out column on the right. And that can give you an idea about how many things or how much of your energy is feeding into avoiding feelings of guilt, shame, and obligation. So I think that's really important to do. And what that will do is show you that, yes, you do have choices, and how do you want to spend your time and energy? And then that will also show you small steps that you can begin to take. If there are lots of things on your opt-out list, try and figure out, well, what thing can I not do or do less of? And what that also does is it increases your sense of agency, of strength, and in control, and remind you that guilt, shame, and obligation may be hanging around all the time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to listen to their voices. And so one of the things that I do in my professional work with my clients is that we work on not working so hard to get rid of feelings, right? If you feel like guilt, shame, and obligation are horrible things that you have to get rid of at all costs, then you're going to do things that maybe you don't want to do just so that the guilty, shaming, and obligatory voices just shut up and stop bothering you. But that's not the healthiest way to get through things like that. You want to be able to do things that you know you want to do or need to do, while understanding that you still may feel those feelings of guilt, shame, and obligation, and that's okay. It's not something that we necessarily have to react to and put all our energy in getting rid of it. So to learn more about this, or if you want to book a free consultation with me, go to my website, skillsetcounseling.com. You can also book a link, or rather book a consultation by clicking the link in the description box. So I would love to hear from you in the comment section. You know, how have you dealt with those types of feelings of guilt, shame, and obligation? And what sorts of things do you find yourself wanting to opt out of? And what things are you choosing to do because you want to, not just to avoid, you know, bad feelings, such as feeling guilty or feeling ashamed or feeling obligated to? So I'd love to hear from you in the comments, and I hope you have a wonderful and a peaceful day. Bye-bye.